Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, and on the show today, Sensei Ray Owles. Ray, welcome. We're going to start our conversation here in just a moment, but for the audience, if you're new, please check out whistlekick.com for all the things that we do, because we do a lot of things. Our goal here is to connect, educate, and entertain the traditional martial artists of the world on our path to get everybody to train for at least 6 months. If you want to support that mission, check out the things that we've got going on over there. And if you want to go deeper on this episode, show notes, links, photos, all that good stuff, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com is the best place to go. We bring you every single episode over there, all of them. You can search them. Lots of stuff happening there. But Sensei Ray, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. I appreciate you being here. And so where should we start? You've listened to some episodes. When you've listened, have you thought, this is the thing we've got to kick off with?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's, I've heard a lot of different things on the episodes. I don't know that, my journey is that profound or different from anybody else's journey,
So says everyone who's on the show.
Right, exactly.
Everybody says
we
that.
all started the same, right?
Even the best ones, the best episodes, still, before we hit record, I don't know if I have anything to say.
Right.
Well, how about this then? When did you start? What's episode or issue 1 of the Ray Owles martial arts comic book?
I think issue 1 is, Karate Kid movies, child of the 80s and early 90s. So, that was a product of the Karate Kid and the Ninja Turtles and all that good stuff. The early 90s, there was like an explosion of martial arts action movies. You couldn't, everywhere you turned, it was Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme, everything. And I just, from a young age, I had been interested in it, but never really had an opportunity to train. I, bounced around a lot of different sports as a kid, basketball, t-ball, soccer, you name it. None of them really stuck until I was able to get myself in a dojo finally. And that was like, something about it felt different. I'm like, ooh, this is.
How old were you when you started?
What's that?
How old were you when you started?
It was 91 when I started, so I was 13 years old.
Okay.
I went to
so we're just about the same age. 78?
77. Yeah.
77. Okay. So,
yep.
Close. We're real close.
Yeah. I just had a birthday, so.
Well, that does it. All right. Year and a half. Probably about a year and a half. Yeah, just about a year and a half. All right. Well, did you try? Like, did you bug your parents? Did you say, I want to do this?
No, not really. It was nothing I really pushed for. One of my good friends had started training, and he invited me to a buddy day class at the dojo he was training at, and I went in, had that one buddy day class, was instantly hooked. Ended up winning 3 free months of lessons out of it, and here we are 31, 32 years later, still going. My mom always used to joke that was the most expensive free prize she ever won in her life.
Well said. And hey, those of you in the audience that run schools, if you missed it, rewind, because that is if you're doing raffles, if you're getting names and everyone is not winning free classes, I think you're doing it wrong. But so you jump in there, it feels different. You're hooked, it sounds like. How much of the hook was because of what you watched before? Because let's face it, Karate Kid and the Ninja Turtles and Seagal movies don't really translate to what an early white belt experiences in their first few months of training.
No, not at all. But I think that was part of the hook, is that I knew that that wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. But I'm like, it felt different to me than like regular organized sports, because if I'm not the most gifted athletically, the best baseball player, the best basketball player, there's people coming in that are already ahead of me, and I'm going to ride the bench till I get good enough to get out there on the field. But with martial arts, it's like, let's make you the best you. And you're not going to have to sit on the sidelines. You're going to be there. You're going to be standing next to somebody that's really good or behind somebody that's really good, and you can try to follow them and emulate them, and you don't just have to sit there and watch and go to practice but not get to participate.
Right. It's hard to get better without the game, and it's hard to put everything you have into practice when you don't think you're going to be playing
Sure.
in the game. But martial arts, in the way it's trained in most schools, there are no sidelines.
Yeah.
Everybody's there. This idea that we train separately but together. The older I get, the more that I talk to people, the more intrigued I am that we stumbled on this format.
Yeah.
Maybe stumbled isn't quite the right word, but it works.
Yeah,
so
whether
you're there,
it stumbled or by design, it seems to work.
It does. All right. So you jump in there and you're having a good time and you're hooked right away. What's the next plot point along your timeline?
Well, from there, I get more and more involved. I get less involved in other school activities, other sports.
How about homework? Was homework getting less involved? We've heard that dynamic before. Okay.
It was getting done, but had to practice my new kata first.
That's right.
Yeah. After I got those new moves down in the kata, then I can worry about the math and social studies homework. For sure. But priorities, right? I started getting pretty involved in tournament competitions and going out and doing that, and that was fun for a while. And started doing some student teaching. So basically, just any opportunity to get myself at the dojo as much as possible, because I just loved it there. I loved the people there, camaraderie. It was okay. So, if I join the tournament team, I get to come to more classes. Cool. Oh, I can volunteer to be a student teacher and come to extra classes and help with more classes. Cool. I want to do that. Oh, there's a black belt club and I can come to another extra class once a month for that. Cool. So it was just really trying to find more excuses to be in the dojo.
You were all in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, hook, line, and sinker.
What was the response at home? Right? 13, teenage years can be difficult as is, but combine the disruption that is common among teenagers with the hormones, and now maybe a potentially unearned sense of confidence from training. Was that a recipe for trouble at home?
I don't think too much. I mean, I would have had to have been home more for it to be a recipe for trouble, right? I think it was good because I think from my parents' point of view, they knew, well, okay, we can take them. And, until I was driving on my own to get myself to the dojo, they knew that they could take me and drop me off. And there was, 4 hours or whatever it was a day that they knew that I was in a safe, controlled environment. I wasn't going to be out running the streets causing trouble. I'd be in the dojo causing trouble.
They were supportive?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Did they ever watch you compete?
Yeah, my dad did a lot of driving for the tournament team. There's myself and a couple of friends, and I grew up in Southeast Connecticut, so I'm down in Texas now, but I grew up in Southeast Connecticut, so my dojo was actually in Rhode Island that I trained in. But in that area, everything's small, so every tournament was it's drive to New York, drive to Boston, drive to New Hampshire, drive to so a lot of weekend road trips. So all the dojo parents would we'd kind of bundle up and sort of take turns with who would drive. But yeah, definitely in the early years, my parents were real supportive. My dad was kind of one of the main carpool drivers for the tournament team. I remember we were in one tournament in Boston, and we'd gone out to a restaurant to eat afterwards. And one of my good friends who was with us, he decided for whatever reason not to change at the gym and wear his gi to the restaurant. And then he got to the restaurant and felt really weird about it. Yeah. So he asked my dad to borrow his keys so he could go get his bag and change clothes. And then he comes back about 10 minutes later with this really worried look on his face. And says, if I locked your dad's keys in his car, would that be a problem? And this is it's a Saturday night at 8 p.m. and we're in Boston.
It's not
2.5 hour drive home. Yeah, it was a problem. But
so what'd you do?
We ended up finding a locksmith, but we stayed at the restaurant a lot longer than we meant to or needed to. But we were able to track down a locksmith eventually. Yeah, get in. But was a fun ride home. My dad wasn't real happy.
I'm sure he wasn't thrilled. No, he probably didn't drive the next event, did he?
He did not.
Yeah. Yeah. Gonna need a break for that one. And that probably
Yeah.
I'm guessing that kid has not locked anybody's keys in the car since.
Hopefully not.
All right. So competitions and anybody who's spent time, especially as a teenager in competition, it can be incredibly formative because you're looking for so many things as a teenager, and in a lot of ways, martial arts training doesn't necessarily give you the social structure and that outlet that team sports does, but martial arts competition can. That was my story. It sounds like that's a bit of your story as well. Were you making friends at tournaments? Were there people you were seeing time and again in your divisions?
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously we had a lot of friends in the dojo that I was training and traveling with, but you sort of start to see the same people and making a few friends outside of that circle as well from other schools in the area because especially in that small New England group, it's a lot of the same people at the same tournament. So we might have been at some of the same tournaments together.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we were.
Yeah.
Would have been. I mean, the heaviest years for me were like 94 and 95, but there was some stuff 93 and 96 as well.
Yeah, it was kind of 90, probably 93 was when I was about the heaviest year for me. And I sort of started transitioning it out shortly around after that, around a little after 93.
Because it's tiring. It's a lot of work. People forget, if you want to show up and really perform at a high level, your training in class is not all you need.
Yep.
And I mean, there are some schools that train in that way, but you were probably training during your quote off time.
Yep.
What did that look like for you? How were you getting that done?
Off time wasn't really too much of a thing. I feel like I was spending it. I would stay at the dojo till they sort of locked the doors and kicked us out, and then a lot of times, depending on the night or what was going on, it might be buddies from the dojo and hey, let's go down to the bowling alley. Let's play some Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat was definitely good practice for competition.
Oh, absolutely. Right. That was the days before the internet, right? So the only way you're always trying to cover your joysticks so nobody can figure out the secret move.
Yeah. You found that move because you bought, a Nintendo Power magazine or something, which I don't know if that would have been the magazine at that point, but that was a magazine through the 80s. And, just like, I'm not going to tell you because now I've got you, right? And a bit of a parallel with sparring.
Yeah, for sure. But, and then somewhere around that 93, 94 time frame, kind of started to have a little shift maybe in my focus. I started to meet some older, higher ranking, more of these, when I say older, I'm probably older now than they were then, but some of these higher ranking, more traditional guys and that didn't really do the competition thing and started seeing different things from what I was used to. And that was, that like, I really remember, specifically being at a seminar that my sensei hosted and he brought in instructors from California and, North Carolina. And I'm watching these guys and like, they're wearing the same patch on their chest that I'm wearing, but they're doing things and talking about things that I've never seen and heard of. And that's cool. I want more of that.
The way you're talking about it and just the look on your face suggests that there might have been some light bulb moments for you.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I get the sense that you remember how that felt.
Yeah. I mean, I vividly remember sitting in the bleachers at the high school gym and, watching these guys demonstrate things and be like, whoa, where'd you get that from? Or, then the next day we're in class and, they start demonstrating some ground fighting techniques. And again, this is, early 90s. So this is like the kind of the advent and the birth of the UFC. That's when it was kind of like the anything goes format, right? Where there was no weight classes or rounds or gloves, or it was just, okay, go at it. And, at the time it was the Gracie family, right? It was kind of big. So to all of a sudden see that this art that I'm studying, and it was always watch that stuff and be like, oh, well, that's cool, but we don't do that. I've never learned that. It might be fun one day. And then to see these instructors taking techniques out of things that I have learned, like moves from katas that I know, and be like, oh no, this is a ground control. This is side control. This is an arm bar. This is a, I was like, what?
This can be more than a low block
Yeah.
and a punch.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not just blocking, punching, and kicking. Like that blew my mind. So yeah, definitely a big aha light bulb moment there for sure.
Now, did that start to change the way you trained?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was somewhere within that time frame. The head instructor was Dave Aarons, and he's been on this podcast before. Cheap plug. Go listen to his episode. It's
No,
awesome.
those we love those plugs.
Yeah. It was around the same time he got the great idea to start his own school, and when he made that decision, he had sort of been the guy that taught my very first buddy day class I went to, and we had sort of built a bit of a bond and a friendship. It was not just a instructor student relationship. It was almost like I've got a big brother, but it was almost like a big brother, little brother type relationship that we had. And when he said, "Hey, I'm going to open a dojo," I said, "Hey, I'm going with you." So it wasn't. I think we had very similar. He had sort of seen the same things I had seen, and I think we realized we wanted to go down that path of a more.
How old were you at that time?
At that time, that would have been 93, 94. So
okay.
I'm 16ish.
Yeah. So that
16.
It sounds awfully mature, right? If we think now, a 16-year-old who is competing, and I'm going to guess seeing at least some success based on that frequency and just the way you're talking about how you approached it. I'm hearing, you know what? I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to give up this, and I'm going to go in this other direction. Am I reading that right?
A little bit. And I think on the competition side, I mean, I was never the best guy at the tournament, but depending on the tournament, I would place. Went to enough tournaments that sort of by the end of the course of the season, I'd accumulate enough points I'd always sort of be sitting in the top 5 for sure. Sometimes I'm coming home from a tournament with a first place trophy. Sometimes I'm coming home with nothing, but I felt like I'd sort of, without going to the next level of just becoming a full-time competitor and maybe getting on a travel tournament team that it's like a sponsor team, like a John Paul Mitchell team or something like that. I felt like I'd sort of plateaued with where it was. It was like, okay, this is about as far as I can take it. So, what would be the next thing to be able to continue this journey?
So you shift, you go into this other school as it's opening. Did that cause any friction with your instructor?
I mean, there was some friction within how it all went down, but I mean, not really, because we did things sort of separately, and sort of went to him and said, "Hey, I'm going to go start training at this other school that Sensei Owles is open," and he was okay. It was kind of like a handshake and best luck to you and go for it. And I think it was at the time it was more of a challenge to convince my parents. Because at the time I was probably I was about 6 months away from black belt if I had stayed at the school I was at, and they'd signed up for the black belt club contract and all these other things. So they're like, well, you committed to black belt, you really should stay there and see this through. And I think that from their point too, there was some of the you're in an established dojo which has been around for a long time versus going off more or less to your friend's dojo that, we love him. Dave's a great guy too, but what if I think there was maybe some fear on their part. What if his dojo doesn't work? Then what? I think they were seeing big picture things that I wasn't even thinking about.
Parents are good at that.
Yeah. To Sensei Owles and to myself, it was kind of a failure is not an option with his dojo. But it's easy to say failure is not an option when I don't know. The game plan is let's just do it, see what happens.
All right. So it sounds like you convinced them at some point.
Yeah.
Start training over there. What's next?
Next was kind of the college. So kept training there. Ended up off at college, and I know that's I was able to, luckily, again, New England being so small, I went to University of Connecticut, so provided me opportunities at least once a month or so to come back to the dojo and train.
Cool.
Through college, I got involved met some people in the college that also trained, and we all basically kind of formed like a little martial arts club on campus for all these students that are sort of displaced from their dojos going to college, and that was kind of a fun time because there's a lot of people in and out of it, but it's myself and one other guy that I trained in Shorin Ryu, and he trained in Goju Ryu, and it kind of started because we kind of go to the field house and the gym and kind of work out in the corner, and we noticed each other kind of working out and doing martial arts stuff. We started talking to each other, and then realized that, hey, maybe this is something there's probably more of us. And so we started pulling it, but it was kind of the two of us were sort of the main catalyst for that. And so we got
surprised there hadn't been a club before that.
Yeah, there wasn't. It was weird. There was, there was a judo specific club, and there was like fencing clubs and all this other stuff, but there wasn't like a karate club.
For folks who don't know, UConn as a school is massive, 50,000 students.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Right. So think about a town of 50,000, and there not being a martial arts school there. It's going to be kind of uncommon. So yeah. I'm surprised. All right. So I would imagine that's scratching a bit of the itch, but also exposing you to more and different and interesting.
For sure, yeah, and that started to, I think, open some avenues for. Now it's not just going to class and training, right? Now it's not just going to class and teaching, but you're teaching what someone else tells you to teach. Now it's sort of, we're getting together. It's like, okay, cool, we're here. What do we want to do? Yeah. You teach me something, I'll teach you something. You teach me a kata, I'll teach you a kata. You show me a hit or a throw or a joint lock, I'll show you a pressure point or a wrist lock or whatever. And so kind of, trying to navigate what do we do? What do we need to maintain? What do we want to keep up?
And do you remember any specifics of things that you found really interesting, for good or for bad? Was there stuff that you were exposed to and you went,
I don't, nothing really specifically sticks out. I just remember it being sort of a fun time to learn things. I was pretty involved in student activities in college, so I got some avenues there, and that's how I was able to sort of use some of those connections to get a little bit of funding through the university to put it together so we can make it a little bit bigger. I got involved with the women's center on campus again through some of my connections with student activities. So we started to host like some self-defense seminars and things like that. We got some involvement with the university police department to come out and do some stuff. So that was, it was really cool. Again, it was just opportunities again to just sort of push the limits of what I can do and explore this thing of teaching a little bit more versus being a student. And
cool. So college comes, it goes, you graduate, and then what?
Graduate and move to Texas.
Okay. For work?
Not initially, no. For personal, my family was originally from Texas. My dad was a military contractor for the Navy, so that's how we ended up in the New England area. It was just kind of one of those, I didn't really have anything immediately planned after college, and I had an opportunity to move down, stay with some family down there for a bit outside of Houston. Through the karate organization I trained in, we had dojos down in the Texas and the Houston area. Virginia, North Carolina, Texas were all kind of hotbeds of our organization. So I knew that I had some connections down there. I'm like, let me, roll down to Houston and see what happens. Maybe I'll spend 6 months or so down there and then figure out what I'm going to do with my big boy life. And we'll go from there. And, that was December of 2000 that I moved down here for 6 months. And now we're about to be December 2023. So
yeah, wow. Now we could talk about the personal side, but let's talk about the differences in your training. Most of us, if we think about our friends who pick up and move, right, they go somewhere really far away. A lot of them come back.
Yeah.
especially at that age. They go, they do a few years, maybe 6 months,
Yeah.
and they come back, and it's good, but there was something about whatever they had moved to that was lacking, so that they come back, but you didn't come back. So that suggests to me that not only did you find good stuff, you found more good stuff than you'd had. So let's talk about the training side of it. What were you finding in your training in Texas that made you? Because I'm going to guess that was probably a pretty important part for you. What
Yeah.
made you with the training that made you
The
stick around?
training was good. It was, it was a lot more of the same. I was, training with some very high level, high ranking guys. Um, but it was kind of fun getting to. It just kind of flipped the script on things where I had my dojo that I trained at, and I'd get to see some of these high ranking guys 2 or 3 times a year at camps or seminars if I'm lucky. And it just kind of flipped. Now it's like I'm training with some really high level guys on a weekly basis, but then still getting to see all the friends I grew up with and my instructors back home and all that 2 to 3 times a year at a seminar. So it was kind of like the opposite side of the same story.
Okay.
But I've never, to all through that time and even to this day, I've always considered Sensei Aaron's my primary sensei, and it was never like I'm leaving the dojo or I'm leaving you, but it's just I've got this opportunity to explore, and it just kind of panned out the way it did.
Nice. One of the things that's always interesting about organizations is that, and you'll be able to speak to this, but for the folks in the audience, when we think about a grouping of martial arts schools, even in the organizations that try to keep everything absolutely perfectly the same, it's never perfectly the same. There are always some differences. So I find that schools are either, they try for that standardization,
Yeah.
and they reluctantly acknowledge that it doesn't completely exist, or those organizations are more philosophical, and that the curriculum is more in spirit than it is in actual technique. This organization, which side of the spectrum did it trend towards?
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty strong organization, and I think you can take a room full of karateka from our organization from across the country, even across the world, and put us in the same room, even if we've never trained together. You say, okay, we're going to do Pasai Show, and everybody's Pasai Show is going to be really close as you can get to looking similar. I've trained with some other organizations and some guys down here in Texas, and Matsumura Sato guys that I trained with. One of them said one time him and his father had gone to one of our training camps. He goes, that's one of the things that impressed me the most about your guys' organization is how uniform you guys can be and how in alignment you guys are. He goes, in our organization, where there's a lot of, everybody's doing things different because everybody like, well, you do it that way, but so-and-so taught me to do it this way, so I'm not going to do it that way. So they're all kind of like, where we're all trying to be like, let's get together and unify this. I've seen a lot of organizations where they're like, well, no, the way that I'm doing it's right and you're doing it wrong. So it's almost like I'm going to intentionally do it different from the way
so
you
you
do
go
it.
to Texas, and maybe the style of classes are different, but the techniques are the same, the forms are the same, and you really were able to jump in with both feet.
Yeah, I sort of dove right in. Didn't really skip a beat.
Cool.
For sure.
Okay. And so I don't know what issue of the comic book we would be on here, but what's the next issue look like?
Couple of years go by, things happen, and I get to a point where the dojo that I'm training at is not is sort of going away. There's not really a senior student willing to take over the helm or that has the ability to, so it sort of scatters to the wind, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? So I started training again on my own a little bit, and doing kind of like some private one-on-one stuff with people here and there. And then somewhere out of that gets born the idea of, let me start my own dojo. It worked great for my sensei back in Rhode Island. I can do it too.
Now a bit of a pressured question, but I think I have to ask it. Had you really not been thinking of opening a school?
No, I really hadn't to
Okay.
that point. I mean, and that's weird because, I often think back to
Yeah.
that. And my dojo, actually, we just had our 15th anniversary
Cool. Congratulations.
this month. Thank you. Thank you. But it was, I always knew karate was something that I loved. I absolutely enjoyed doing it. I sought out all my free time to do it. But for some reason, I just never had the connection of, yeah, I should absolutely run my own school. It was just sort of, I love doing it. I'm going to go to the dojo I train at and help as much as I can and teach other people. But it never really crossed my mind that, oh yeah, that would be or could be something that I could do on my own as well.
Mm. Okay. So you start thinking, I'm going to open a school. How long did it take from the idea to day one?
Um, it took a little bit of time. It was probably, I'd say there was a good year and a half in there where the school that I had previously trained at, another guy came in, and he sort of took things up. He was going a completely different route. He was doing like military combative stuff, like hand to hand. It was almost like a Krav Maga type thing, I guess would be the
Your
best.
tone of voice tells us how enthused you were
Yeah,
about that.
but I think that would be sort of the best description of it. But he did offer me some space to, hey, if you want to come in and work out. And there was a few people from the old dojo that would kind of pop in and out here and there. And around this time, I moved out of Houston proper into the suburbs too. So that commute became, turned in from a 20-minute commute into an hour and 20-minute commute. The thing about Houston, if people don't understand Houston geography, Houston is over an hour away from Houston. So
Yeah, I've heard people say that. I've been to Houston once. I spent like 3 days there as a kid. All I remember is the most humid place I've ever been on earth.
yes,
I have been a lot of places. I've been to a lot of tropical places, and none of them hold a candle to the humidity I experienced in
yeah,
Houston.
I always joke that living in Houston is my training for when I go to Okinawa because I'm always prepared for the humidity in Okinawa.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you get going. You got some space. Are you pulling in students from the sort of defunct school, or you feel like you're starting from scratch?
No, it was kind of a start from scratch. I had, one or two people that had kind of popped in when I was in the old space, but again, was geographically, I was not really near that space. So it was kind of a start from scratch thing. And, just started trying to get stuff out on Facebook groups and things like that I was there and pulled in, it was, the first year or so, I had 3 to 5 students or something like that. And
Which can be really disheartening.
yeah.
For folks that are trying to make a go of it. And I work with a variety of school owners in a professional sense. And, working with people as they get a school going, we all have this grand vision, right? Like, I'm going to open the doors. And because I'm so passionate about this thing, and I'm investing everything I have, and I empty my 401k to buy mats, and I do whatever these things are that we do, I'm going to have 100 students by the second month. And more often than not, I have 3 to 5 students after 3 months.
Yeah. And, I've ended up in a really lucky situation down where I was because I kind of started looking for, because I knew that it wasn't going to be a full-time gig. I wasn't like, let me empty out my savings, let me quit my job.
Yeah.
Like I knew I wasn't anywhere near that point. But I'm like, let's see what I can make go of this. And I started looking around, so I was looking for places to sublease. I'm like, is there like a dance school or something I can find? And eventually I find a guy who's doing a jiu-jitsu based MMA program. And I look at his schedule and I notice he has class like twice a week, and that's it. So I kind of get in touch with the guy and go in and meet him
because he had his own space.
Yeah, and
which suggests, hey, this place is not getting used most of the time.
Yeah. And at the time, the space was a warehouse that was owned by one of his students for a company that he ran, and it was just a little spot off to the side. So that's how he was able to get away with it being part time. And I'm like, well, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing the rest of the nights? He's like, nothing. I'm like, well, I'm kind of looking for a place to train and a place to start something up. Would you be interested? And he goes, yeah. I mean, we worked out a really great deal, and he was more than really gracious at letting me get up and running, and how sort of that payment structure worked at first. And within about a year, both of our classes had grown to a size where we wanted a little bigger space, and we
that's awesome.
were able to move to another space together, and we maintained a solid business structure for over 10 years, all the way up to and just through COVID. And it was just within the last year and a half or so now that I finally expanded my business to the point where I could get my own space. So,
we've brought this up on the show, but I want to point this out for anyone who is thinking about opening a school. What you did there is absolutely beautiful. Here's a school, right? So you're already going to be around some like-minded people, but there are a lot of folks who are going to look at that and they're going to get scared, right? What if they think I'm trying to steal their students, or what if they steal my students, right? Neither is something that we want. But here's the counter argument. Where do you find every Burger King? Next to a McDonald's. Why, right? It creates awareness, and that awareness more than compensates for any of the quote loss that you might have happen with the other school. And I'm going to guess if we just spend time focusing on this, which we don't have to, there are probably a lot of benefits, mutual benefits to sharing that space. If you did that many years with this other person, you both were getting a lot out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, there were a lot of times where, just for various reasons, I'd get a lead or he'd get a lead, and, we'd talk to somebody and he'd be like, hey, you know what? It doesn't really sound like I'm quite the program you're interested in, but check out my buddy here that teaches on the other nights. Or same thing. I'd get somebody that comes in that sounds, they're looking for like something different than what I offer. I'm like, well, I don't really know that a traditional Okinawan ranked martial arts system is for you, but hey, I got these guys. If you come back tomorrow night, there's going to be guys rolling around here doing no-gi. And that sounds like it's right up your alley. So, so we were, kind of the exact opposite of competition. We were kind of fostering and encouraging and sort of promoting each other and giving each other referrals. So,
well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So you said you expanded, needed your own space. How did you know you were ready for that?
Kind of got forced into that one as well. So we made it through COVID. The guy that I had partnered with for about 10 years ended up selling off his half of the business. And so another instructor came in and took over the program, and things were going great. They were fine there. And then this is, I don't know, probably six months or 8 months or so after COVID restrictions start to lift and we're back in business. And, I went to Zoom and was teaching over Zoom, which was all that stuff. Just keep the dojo going, the business going. Thought we were back in business. I'm like, all right, things are going great. We're starting to pick up, get new students. And he comes to me one day and he's like, hey, my wife got a job in Dallas and we're moving. I'm like, cool. When you moving? He's like, Sunday. This is like Wednesday.
Ooh.
And I'm like, well, that's cool. I said, no big deal. I said, well, what's the status with the lease right now? Because he's leasing and I'm subleasing. He's like, oh, I'm going month to month with the landlord right now. I said, okay, cool. I'll talk to the landlord. I'll take over the lease. I've been subleasing here for 10 years. That makes the most sense. Let's do that. So before I get a chance to talk to the landlord, the next night I'm teaching class and I see somebody come in and with a tape measure and he's
it's never a good sign. Somebody comes into your business with a tape measure.
Yeah.
It's not a good sign.
Let's go. So talk to the landlord that weekend and I'm like, hey, I know maybe there's something going on here on the side. I'm not really sure, but I've been the guy that's been subleasing here. What's me and you? Let's make a deal.
Yeah.
I'll take over the lease and do that. And yeah, sure. So I end up there later the weekend. I think it was like Sunday afternoon because I knew that my business partner was moving out, and I wanted to make sure I was just double checking, because we both had equipment there, so I want to make sure that everything was still in place and I was sort of ready to go for classes the next week. And as I'm there, kind of going through and inventorying and checking layout of stuff, the same guy that came in with the tape measure a couple nights before pulls up with a truck full of gear and starts unloading it. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm taking over the lease. this is my cage. I'm setting up a giant octagon in the middle of the floor. I'm like, I don't know about that. So I get a hold of the landlord, and he's like, yeah, well, I don't know what's going on. You know, I told you could sign a lease, but I told him he could sign a lease. So I think he wanted us to get into a bidding war. So I walked away from it.
It's slimy.
Yeah.
I don't like slimy
it was kind of a weird situation. I walked away from it. Ended up a week or so late, went back to Zoom, which for the students it was kind of bad. I'm like, hey guys, we know how to do this. So I think I'm kind of a weird situation in that case where I think COVID actually saved my dojo, because had COVID not happened and we didn't have this structure in place of how to teach via Zoom, if this happened, I think I would have been, okay, well, we're up a creek without a paddle now. I guess that was it, guys. Good run. But we went back to Zoom really briefly. I bumped into another martial artist here in town where I live who his program had pretty much completely shut down during COVID. His was kind of based off of a after-school program. And he was just trying to get ramped back up, but he was transitioning his model to more of a daycare center. So he was doing like summer camps and stuff like that. So his space was filled all day long with kids, but empty at night. So we kind of started
once
talking.
Again, finding the opportunity.
Yeah. We started talking, kind of played let's make a deal. So I got into another sublease arrangement for a while where, you know, when I walked away from this, I'm like, I'm never subleasing again. I'm either going to find my own space or I'm done. And then 6 weeks later, I'm like, I signed another sublease. But did that for about a year. And then he got to the point where he was about to sell the business off, but with planning this time. And I was able to, he actually hooked me up with the realtor that found my warehouse space literally half a mile around the corner. So
nice.
Couldn't have, I wanted to stay in an area because I didn't want to alienate any of my students or be like, hey, yeah, we got a new space and it's 20 miles away. You might as well start from scratch if you're going to do that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll come back to the now, but if we were to rewind, you know, one of the core philosophies seemingly in every martial art is, you know, let's refine, let's do it differently, let's do it better.
Sure.
Was there anything you did differently the second time with the sublease versus the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just had a lot better understanding going in. I had some knowledge behind me, you know. When I started the first time, it's like, well, let's just see what happens. But I think I had a little bit more of an idea of a business model and a business sense and what I wanted the school to be and how I wanted to identify. And it was an opportunity to get a little bit of a fresh start in a new space, but, you know, still had a lot of the same students. But I think mentally in me, there was sort of a shift of, I need to get a little more serious about this now. Not that I never, you know, I don't want to say I never took it seriously, but it had more weight to it, I felt at this point. Because I think especially after COVID, I really felt like, man, if I'm putting this much effort into a hobby, right? Like, and so it definitely felt a little different. It felt like it was getting more real.
Now, it has not been, and I'm getting this sense, still is not your full-time job?
Not full-time, no. I mean, if you ask my wife, it's my second full-time job.
Yeah. A lot of us can relate to that.
But, you know, I've got my regular Monday through Friday, big boy downtown office job. And then I teach. I've expanded my schedule now, because when any of my sublease stuff, it was kind of like 2 nights during the week and then a weekend day. So we were kind of like maxing out about 3 days a week in classes, which again, not that far off from what a full-time school would do. Most people are training on average 2 to 4 days a week. But just, everything was crammed into a tighter spot. So, you know, I've expanded the schedule a little bit now. We have classes 4 days a week, that we're having classes every day, and, you know, kind of variety of classes. So, you know, some people are coming 4 days a week, some people are coming 2 days a week, but there's more. I've got the ability now to offer more class options.
Nice.
Expand the
When you
schedule.
say variety, what do you mean by variety of classes?
Well, think like it was, especially when you're only training, 2 or 3 days a week, it was harder to fit some things in. Like one thing, especially through COVID, sparring classes just kind of went away for us. It's like, okay, well, we're not allowed to do contact, so we're going to do a lot of kata training, a lot of this, but we're not going to spar. And then it's kind of getting going again. It was just hard to. I felt like curriculum became so important. It was hard to sort of slot in a regular, okay, we're going to spar on Wednesdays because we can't, because we got to do weapons on Wednesdays, because we do kata on Tuesdays, sort of thing. So the ability to offer like a dedicated sparring class, dedicated classes. I added a preschool program in, which was not anything I initially ever thought I'd do, and that's become my biggest class recently here, which is
Really? Why were you, maybe resistant is the right word, but why did you not expect you would ever do that?
I just again I especially in the town that I live in, there's I think an oversaturation of youth martial arts programs, and a lot of them are based off of after school programs or drop off and pickup programs. So it's not that I didn't want to do it, I just didn't feel like that was not a sort of a pool I wanted to fish in, because that was always sort of, anytime I got a call, hey, do you offer programs for 5-year-olds? Sure. Okay, great. What time can I drop them off in the morning to go to school, and then what time can I pick them up after work? Yeah, it's not that.
Yeah, that's not what we do.
You can drop them off at 5:25 because class starts at 5:30, and you can pick them up at 6:02 because class ends at 6.
But again, it's the Burger King McDonald's thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You get that added benefit on the marketing side of all your competitors, right? Convincing people this is a good thing to do.
Sure.
And now you can add your own flavor to it.
Absolutely.
All right. I think the last subject I really want to dig into here is around, kind of brings it full circle, what you're teaching. Right?
Yeah.
You've gone through, you've talked about these kind of pivot points where, oh, that, right? Sensei errands and going to college and getting a chance to expose yourself to these other people. And I would imagine sharing space with these other folks made you, at least at moments, go, oh, interesting, right? You just strike me as that type of person who's going to be observant. How has what you're teaching now evolved or changed? I think we have to call it evolved, because I don't imagine you would change something to make it worse. Sure. Right? So how has what you're teaching now evolved over the course of the last 15 years or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the jokes we always make in martial arts is that, we never really invent anything, right? We just sort of steal really good stuff that we like from other people, right? Yeah. There's always kind of a joke when we go to these training camps. We'll sit around, we'll watch all the instructors, and, I'll demonstrate something, and somebody will come over and be like, hey, I'm stealing that. I'm like, cool, because that thing you taught 5 minutes ago, I already stole that too. Yeah. So I think, being able to just work on a high level with some really knowledgeable traditional instructors and get this exposure to things. And, a lot of it, we want to try to maintain the spirit of it, but I also know that if you teach me something and I try to teach it, go back to my students and teach it the same way you taught it, I'm going to fail. But if I can take the spirit or the idea or the principles behind what you're teaching and put my little spin, my little flavor on it to make it my own, bring that back, then I think that that's going to ring truer to me. It's going to, I can make it make sense for me, and hopefully make it make sense for my students as well.
Nice. All right. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. No, and so within the organization I'm part of, again, we're a big organization. I've got some opportunities here in Texas with some other guys, and mentioned some like Matsumura Sato, which has more of a Chinese or a white crane sort of flair to it. It's more of a family style of Shorin Ryu. So they do things a little bit different. So I've definitely got kind of that flavor, his influence, sort of the things that I do and how I teach and train for sure. So I think we're all, like we're all baking the same cookie, but maybe you like chocolate chips and I like M&Ms in it or something. I don't know. That's a good analogy.
I like that metaphor. That's a good one.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all going to have really delicious cookies. So,
Right. Cookies are still good. I mean, it is a rare cookie that I don't want to eat. Right. Like even, all right, fine. I'll only eat 2 more.
Yeah.
And, so what's going on with your training now? What excites you, outside of the teaching part? Because I can tell that really excites you. What excites you about your own training today?
I mean, obviously, I think that like you said, the teaching's a huge part of it. And, at a certain point, everybody starts training for a reason, right? Whether it be, I thought karate was always cool, or, I was getting bullied, so I wanted to learn to defend myself. Things like that. Or, I wanted to compete in tournaments, right? But at some point I think when your reason for training is internal, I think that's when you see people that sort of hit these stops, right? Like I think when I was on tournament competition, it would have been easy to hit a stop and say, oh, I've sort of accomplished what I could as this. So, okay, let's put that chapter to bed. What's next? But I think maybe the longer you train, if your training starts to become more external, and it's not just about what you're doing for you, but what you're doing for the people around you, and whether that be your students, whether that be your family, whether that be your community, whether that be the sense of camaraderie and friendship. I think that's a huge important piece of it.
Yeah, martial arts as service.
Yeah, absolutely. So what excites me is sort of the unknown of what is next for that journey, right? Like we talked about, issues of comic books. I'm really excited. What's the next chapter? What comes next?
What do you hope's going to be in that book? We get together 5 or 10 years from now, and I say, "Hey, what's happened?" What do you hope you're going to tell me?
I'd love to see just karate continue to grow and prosper. I want to see more traditional martial arts, which I think is making a big comeback. In a way, I want to see more of that. I want to see my students continuing to grow. Hopefully, in 5 or 10 years, if I could say I've got a student that's got their own school, I think that would be a cool thing to be able to see. But it's all kind of an experiment, right? I mean, everything that we do in karate, it's something that I think is true about our training. But I tell my students all the time, don't just do something until you get it right, but do it until you can't get it wrong. And it's, sometimes we're not sure, I think, within our own training, or what's right or what's wrong. Well, I'm not sure, but sometimes I think that means just, let me try this out. Let me go down this road or this avenue. Okay, that didn't work. Let's go back more towards the main road. Let's try the next exit and see what else it is that's out there. But I think the important thing is, just always having that desire to strive. There's definitely there's a fire that's in there that I think I've heard a lot of people, I think, say this on the show, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, right? But we say, everybody says, something to the effect of, karate is not something that I do anymore. So it started, I do karate, but it's more like a part of who I am, right? Like, what's Ray Owles without karate? I don't know. I don't know if I'd recognize that person if I met him, but I know that a lot of who I am today and what I am today, I owe to lots of friends and mentors and instructors that I've had in martial arts.
If you go back to early episodes of the show, there was a question I often asked, and it was, what do you think your life would be today if you had never trained? And I stopped asking that question because so many people went, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. For so many of us, and I include myself in this group, it's almost impossible to imagine what the trajectory of my life would have been, because it put me around the people that I'm around. And And that led to who I am and what I do and what I love.
Yeah. One of my best friends here in Houston, he was actually the best man at my wedding. He has a saying that he got from his dad, and he says, if you're a blessed human, you can hold up your hand and on 5 fingers count 5 people that are like your ride or dies. They will always be there for you for anything or everything. That's called. They'll show up for a dinner party, or they'll show up to help you bury a body. Whatever you need, they'll be there for you. And I've taken a little spin on that, and I've said that I feel like because of karate that I get to do this. So I think I can easily count double that number and go up to 10 just because of the relationships that I've developed through karate. So I think there's definitely a big intangible asset to that it's hard to put a finger on exactly what that is, but we've all got sort of this shared experience. Even if we've never trained together, we know that we've had some similar things.
Yeah, it's something that binds us. We talk about this often on the show. We have more that brings us together, more that we have in common than separates us, for sure.
Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you, website, social media, maybe an email, what stuff can we share with folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on internet at it's owleskarate.com. That's OWLES. There's an E in there that everybody messes up. Instagram and Facebook, you can find me. It's Owles Karate TX. So we're out there.
Okay.
Easy. On the website, the social media, you can get my email and my phone number and all that through those avenues. And
great.
Love to hear from anybody, connect with you guys. For sure. So look us up.
Nice. Yeah. And you're connected with a number of folks who've been on the show before. You mentioned Sensei Aaron's, but a few others. And so I had the pleasure of just being able to kind of step in and go, trust isn't the right word. Sometimes when we bring a guest on, if that guest doesn't know the show well, and I don't know them and I don't know people around them, sometimes we have to hunt a little bit to find that connection that we can build on. I didn't have to do that with you. And so that made my job really fun today. And I thank you for that, for the audience.
I've been listening to your episodes a lot. So it's, to be on the other side of it.
It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's different, but fun.
It's different for me when I end up being interviewed. I'm like, oh, right. Is this what everybody else feels? Right. I feel my job is so much easier.
Sure.
To the audience out there, I appreciate you sticking around and watching or listening to this episode. If something in here resonated for you, make sure you share it with other people. Help us grow the show and grow our mission at Whistlekick to connect, educate, and entertain everybody else who's training, or maybe even more importantly, sometimes the folks who aren't training. If you want to support us, you can go even further. You can join the Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick, or maybe pick something up at the store at whistlekick.com. But Sensei Ray, thank you again for being here. And now it's up to you to close us up. How do you want to leave things in your episode?
See, I knew this was coming. This is maybe the part I dreaded. Is, I was asking for these profound words of wisdom. And, I don't know, but
I never asked for it to be profound.
That's true.
Just say, how do you want it? We've had people say, keep training, and then they just call it.
Yeah. One of the things I always like to say to my students, I mentioned one earlier, one of my other isms that I like to give my students all the time is train hard and practice harder.